reminded me because I have a tendency to forget things. So without further ado, I'm going to mute myself and my video and let Amy take it away. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Well, it looks like we have chipper people in the chat. So um, I appreciate y'all being here. Good morning. Yeah, so last week we talked about what is youth services and how to create a welcoming place. We discussed some of the minutia of the importance of knowing all that is Pokemon and My Little Pony and Harry Potter and whatever the latest cartoon or anime or manga is. Um, uh, the willingness, if you desire to work in youth services, just the willingness to be able to burst into song with no provocation whatsoever, knowing your way about around a glue stick, and because arts and crafts is no joke whatsoever, and another thing that is important, of course, is figuring out what book someone is talking about from a very garbled half description that usually begins with "it's red" or something like that. So we looked at the psychology of kids a little bit. We talked about communication and meeting their needs and how to communicate with kids. So today we're going to continue on with that. So taking that as the groundwork, and then we're going to continue on to the next level of things that the children's librarians and those that work with kids need to consider. And for those of you that don't work with the 18 and under or with families, I'm sure there's a lot of things that can cross over into adult services, into reference, into cataloging, or what say you. So as we look at programming, we need to first find out what is happening around us demographically. And this might sound weird. Why would we start with demographics? Um, we need to look at the needs of our community. And it's likely many of you do this just without even thinking. You glance around and you listen to the people that you work with and talk to. But it's also good to look at things on a greater scale and from a neutral source. So anyway, I encourage you to do that. So we look at our community. We look at the levels of poverty, the levels of unemployment, the income that's around there, the education levels that people have. But we don't stop there. So we also need to consider the breakdown of age groups that are around us. Where are our vulnerable populations? Where are our youngest kids? Where are families? Where are people that have single parents? These maps help us to know this, and the patrons that are out there. Not all of these patrons come into the libraries. So we don't get a true lens of our community without doing some digging and talking about the community. So another thing we need to consider is what languages are around us, what cultures surround us. Are there refugee groups that are coming in? Are there migrant workers around? Have recent populations begun to settle around us and are bringing in new cultures and new languages? We need to consider this. What percentage or what amount of people speak English? What amount of people can read English? What's the other languages that they do? And this also helps us to decide and to identify whether they're literate or not. How are we going to communicate with our people? How are we going to talk to our patrons? And then the last thing that's good to consider, there's other things. So the last map I'm going to bring up with things to consider is how are people living? What type of buildings are around us? Are families or our patrons, are they in apartments? Are they in HUD houses? Are they in mobile homes? Might they be in tents? Do they have a place where they're sleeping? Do they have vehicles? How are they going to get to us on the library? Are they able to walk? Is there bus transportation? Where are their group homes? On the map it says group quarters, but those are also good to know. And that gives us a greater picture of who our patrons are. Now, you may have made this jump already, but why is this important to the programs that we put on? Well, make sure no one's chatting. Nope. So, of course, it's important. Who might come to the programs will impact the programs that we do. So we need to look at who our patrons currently are and who our library and our system would like us to serve. Uh, we need to consider the requests from people that have come in. We need to consider where are the daycares, where are the Ys, where, like the YMTAs, where are the after school clubs, and do we need to pull them in? What do our schools look like? What do our systems look like? So these are all things that we consider in the back of our mind as we're forming programs, is how best to fit the needs of our patrons to allow them to enjoy and learn rather than to have them feel dismay or shame because they don't know a certain amount of information. So this gives us a jump start in understanding what the needs of our patrons may or may not be. So, and again, this is things that adult programmers would do. I'm sure your system looks at this as well. It's likely that you've contacted the elementary schools or minimally looked at the web pages of your schools that are in your counties and checked out the demographics. I'm not positive if every school has it listed, but I believe it's one of the things that is the end goal if it's not already done. Schools have to report their demographics. And as you can see on these maps, this compilation of information is from 2018. So there's always a delay in the information we can get. The most up-to-date information, if you're interested, is actually from the school systems. As I said, the schools have to report the demographics and all the variables that they are dealing with inside of the school system. And that gives us as public librarians a really good taste and understanding of what are the demographics around us. So from all of this kind of stuff, we can then consider what are the needs of the kids. And of course, we do programming based on developmental needs. So we talked about those last week, where we're looking at, how they're communicating, how they're moving physically, how their brain is expressing itself through body movement and verbiage. So we look at their developmental needs. We also need to consider identified needs. And what that is those phone calls that we might get, those emails we get, the rumors that we hear about so-and-so said it'd be really cool to have this type of program. So-and-so said this, or, that kind of thing. The word of mouth helps a lot with that. So we can identify what the desires are of our patrons. And by, as we step forward to being a community place, a community hub, we are building relationships. And as we build relationships and get to recognize people, to know them by their name, kind of like that old sitcom, the Cheers, where, everyone knows your name when you come in, right? So it's the same kind of concept. We're a Cheers without alcohol. So it's knowing people's name, knowing their story helps us then identify needs. What would those kids enjoy doing? What would those families really benefit from? How can we help this parent? How can we help this caregiver? What can we do as a library to make their lives better, to help them enjoy life, and to help them become, for a library, the end goal, lifelong readers, lifelong participants in the public library, supporters of the public library. So it all starts really little. So when they're, in that bump in the mom's belly, as we mentioned last week. So we identify the patrons, and then we need to also identify, who is the support behind the patron. So the patron being the child. So are they with a caregiver? Are they being taken care of by grandparents? Are both parents involved? Perhaps only one parent involved? Are they coming in as a school group? that kind of thing. And then finally, again, I sort of touched this a little bit, but we look at what their interests are. What are kids into? So you will see, or perhaps hear youth services people talking about, oh, kids are totally into this, or they really, really are into Roblox right now, which is an app that they're building systems, sort of like Minecraft. Or they might be really into, there was a time where, not last year, but the year before, where Mendi was back in, which is like the tattooing of the skin that's done in Pacific Asian countries and in Pakistan, India, other places too surrounding that area. So they were really into that. And so we had to get out our design kits and learn how to do it. And how, when we hear something that kids are interested in, it's our job to jump onto it and learn more about it. So we look at fandoms and what are kids following, what are kids throwing up on Pinterest, what are kids doing on Tumblr, what is hot on Instagram. Not so much Facebook. You'll see the majority of 18 and unders are gone off of Facebook at this point. Although they'll still use it, but they overall think it's an old people's thing. So puts us in our place, right? So one other thing, or I can even say that will impact programming, not one more thing, but another thing, or what are the goals of your system? What is the library hoping to do? So is your director saying we need a lot of STEM programming? A lot of school systems have pulled science from elementary schools because science isn't really tested on by the statewide tests, so there's not as much science. So a lot of the library systems and are partnering with museums or working on their own to build up those STEM kits. I'm sure you've seen the grab and go kits go out, and art is a component of STEM or STEAM. So these are things that they're considering. What are the goals of the state? What is the governor looking for us to do? What is the system of the educational system pushing forward? Are there ways we can support that? And then it keeps going, doesn't it? So then we also look at the goals of ALA, the American Library Association, and the subgroups like ALSC, which is the services for children, and YALSA, which is the services for teens. What are their goals? Where are they going? What are people doing together there? Is something happening in California that's amazing that we can bring into Kentucky? Those kinds of thoughts. And then with the virtual system we've been dealing at, we've had to spend a lot of time looking at copyrights, looking at what do we need permission for, and having to get permissions from the publishers to be able to do a lot of the things that we're doing virtually. So you may have some ideas or trends or emphasis or different goals that your system is working on. Everyone, well, you'll find you'll have similarities and differences. Each county, I suspect, has a different thing they want to emphasize, or in different ways. I'm reading your question, Curtis. Curtis asks, what legal responsibilities do we have in the library if we realize people need help, either knowing they need mental health improvement or physical abuse? Well, physical abuse you can report. Mental abuse you can also report. That is something you can actually, this is a much larger question, and so I'm going to dilute it down. Just so I can answer it. I'm happy to talk about this more too, because it is more complex. If you're seeing chronic bruises, if you're seeing chronic abuse, you may call the cabinet and report it. In fact, you, as anyone who lives in Kentucky, are a mandated reporter. So if you suspect that there is abuse, you can call the cabinet and report it. You don't need to fear that that child is going to be immediately taken out of the house. You don't need to fear that you're wrong. The child will not be pulled immediately. Depending on what the symptoms are that you are reporting, They will decide whether or not to pool the child. So you have an actual caseworker goes in and analyzes the situation, does interviews with the child. In certain situations, we'll also do interviews with the caregivers and those surrounding. So you as a library worker can call without fear that you've made a mistake. I think it's reasonable to err on the side of caution and caring for your children. Um, as far as mental issues go, that's a little more complicated. We are not social workers. We are not licensed social workers. We have not been trained as mental health specialists, nor are we therapists. For the most part, I'm sure there's someone out there that may have an LSW or MSW or a PhD. So, generically speaking, when that happens, if they are in the school system, one thing that we can do is contact the schools and say, we've noticed this, talking to their social worker. This might be, I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Another thing you could do is contact their actual teacher. There is there's an issue with privacy and us contacting about a child, but this is a deeper conversation. There are numerous Good Samaritan laws out there that protect us from intending good. And so our goal is to provide the best services we can. We're not mental health specialists. And overall, if it's just us saying a child needs help, I'd let it go. And again, this is very generically speaking. It's hard to speak to specifics on this. The schools will catch it. They'll deal with it. If it really, really bothers you, then you can go to the next level. So this is a whole other conversation, though. Sorry about that. Let's see. I'm gonna retreat back a little bit. I can't be more complete with that than the time that we have right now. So let me glance up at I saw a whole bunch of comments going off. So focus, yeah. A lot of places in the library are still doing virtual, especially with the increase in current COVID levels. So there was up to even a week ago, even to yesterday or the day before, there was an increase of in-person programs. And the governor speaking last night, I suspect will change that a lot, where the programs will be more often outside, or they'll be done virtually, or in a curbside manner where they can grab and go type thing. So let's see. As this points out, though, our design of programs have to be creative and they have to be varied and through different means. So we can't, especially right now, it's so evident we can't just plan for in-person programming. We always have to have the underlying thoughts of it's likely to be virtual, or it might have to be outside, but if I'm outside, what if it rains? What's my backup plan? So I would suspect the majority of you services librarians have a backup plan, at least one, if not two. Another thing we think about is just variety. Yes, Teresa, it is frustrating. This is a frustrating time without having a lot of contact with our kids. And many youth services people have gone into this because they want to be with the kids or with their families, or really enjoy helping parents navigate the waters of that child that's disobedient or disrespectful or needs help in a variety of ways. And this goes back a tiny bit, Curtis, to what you were asking about mental health. If a parent or caregiver comes up asking for information, that opens the door to us helping. And then we can give them resources that are available in the community, as well as online, as well as resources that might be available through the schools or the public system in general. That adult asking for assistance is huge at allowing us to be able to help. Um, so varied variety of ways we need to think of programming. So retreating and jumping back in. We also need to consider, do we need to do it multilingual? And that's not always an option for people. Um, However, it might be nice here and there if, say, you have a patron that speaks Swahili. So could you imagine their face if you walk in and go, Jumbo? That'd be really, I bet they'd lighten up, and it would, you may not know anything else after that, but that one word can make a really big difference. There are people in the Commonwealth that are able to speak other languages, and there are people that are able to speak sign, and I'm integrating that as other languages as well. So those may be things that we can implement, and the amount of implementation can be very, very minor to a completely bilingual program or trilingual or whatever. A lot of times there's a possibility of getting interpreters either from the community or partnering with the school. And that's another option we can always consider, especially for the larger programs or the programs that you're throwing out more money for. And the last thing we consider with design is then, is it developmentally appropriate? So what age group are we trying to hit? Are we working with the babies? Are we working with the tweens? So the 9 to 12-year-olds. Are we doing a teen program, a family program? So it may seem simple what your youth services people are doing, like they just whip it in their back pocket and just throw out a program without even thinking. But I suspect there's a lot of background things that are happening in their brains that you may not be completely aware of. So that's why I'm highlighting these. So we have tons of different programs. Basically, I'm going to go forward a second and then we'll come back to this. So we look at different programs. The most common, I'd say, are those story times. That's where an adult brings in a child and they sit together on the carpet or in chairs, and we'll read a book to them and sing with them. And often there's a little art project or a little craft project at the end, but not always. Toddler programs are often, are gravy. That's one of the most common and highly attended programs are those 3-4-year-old range, 2 to 4. Parents really enjoy that, and even if they aren't completely sure of why it's important to come to library programs, they know in some way that it's important, and they really want to have their child participate in that. So, as you can see here, we also have, different group activities for inside or outside, for different age groups, for different sizes. Sometimes we'll bring in different audio-visual type things, or we'll bring in physical examples of materials. I did a program not that long ago where we brought in different types of food before they were ready to eat. And a whole bunch of kids did not know what broccoli looked like until I broke up the head and they could see what it looked like once it was cooked. They didn't know that potatoes grew off of roots underneath the ground, that kind of thing. So we're often doing educationally oriented programs. Sometimes programs are just flat out fun. There's not a truly identifiable reason to point at and say, this is why we did this program. However, if it was considered by your agency or by your library, I would say doing programs for community integration or community building is just as important as the educational aspects of things. And there are a surprising amount of things that can be learned. So a very common program that you're starting to see more across the nation is homework help. And I'm not talking about the apps, or I'm not talking about what is available through tutor.com. those work for certain age groups and for certain kids that have a certain set of skills. So they have to be able to type in information, but not just that, they need to be able to form a question in order to get the result that they are in need of. That's really hard for a lot of kids to do, to come up with that question that will give me that answer I need. So homework help often is a program that's done by volunteers or by staff, where kids will come in with their homework and get the help that they can't always get at home, for whatever reason. And there are just a gazillion reasons why it's not always possible. So, programming is all very commonly, we have an underlying desire to encourage people to love books, to enjoy reading, to be the lifelong readers and lifelong participants in the library. So no different than what you're seeing in adult services. It's just, the differences come from who we're working with and how we're approaching them and integrating things. So I want to go back and just look at some of the comments because I think I missed a couple. Pride services, yeah. Yeah, I saw Candace wrote about outreach. Yeah, outreach is tough right now, especially with kids and especially with teens. This a common thread that we'll see on YALSA is the minute we find a platform to communicate with the teens, they decide that it's been taken over by adults and bail and find another platform. And that's happened over and over and over through the pandemic, to the point of there were conversations from different teen librarians saying, I don't know where to find my teens anymore. So it's been an interesting experience, and frustrating and irritating and difficult in many, many ways to try and track them down. Yeah, let's see. And Candace posted about classroom type versus a recording. Yeah, we have a limitation with virtual right now that one person can speak at a time. And if two people speak at a time, basically both mics go on the fritz. And there's very little ability to overcome that. So setting up a Google Classroom is really, really nice because you can interact. The problem with that is what I just said, is if two people talk at once, which kids, especially the younger ones, are, nope, which everyone is prone to do when they're passionate about something. It's difficult to maintain a line of communication and a line of thought. But you do have the pros of it's interactive and a lot more, as Candace said in the chat, a lot more like being in real life. And pre-recording things can be a time saver, is what her comment was. And that's true. You can record things when it's comfortable to you and when you have time, and it also allows you time to prep, so it's not catching you by surprise, which often can happen. But again, then you have the negatives where you're not feeding off of kids, you don't have their interactions, you can't see how they're responding, and in the long term, you don't necessarily know how they've appreciated a program. So that brings up the final issue with regards to programming is how, so we talked about promoting it a little bit. I just touched on it with talking about different listservs, talking to people, forming relationships, interacting and emailing with the daycares and the schools and parent groups you may have, different listservs you may have. But then after you have the execution, you have the follow-up. Was this program effective? And that's where, Candace, you may have to look at what is the most effective to my patrons. And when I'm talking about effective, I mean, what works for them? What resonates with them? Do they have a preference for the pre-recorded programs? Do they have a preference for a Google Classroom and learning how to take turns? How about using the raise your hand toggle button? Is that a possibility? Um, yeah, are there other options? Are you able to, you know, get displayed on a large wall? Are you a, you know, what parents may have, or schools, or your adult patrons may have some ideas which you haven't thought of too, or suggestions that they may know about if perhaps they're far more tech savvy than you are. Um, but when you're doing an evaluation after the program, not just a bye, thank you for coming, see you later, but an actual follow-up that's doesn't necessarily have to be face to face, but written down or perhaps through email that they can fill out and give you some feedback. That really goes a long way in helping you form future programs and to hone it to more what the neighborhood is looking for. In general, I think if one family says something, usually there's other families that are thinking the same things and don't want to say it yet. There's always exceptions, of course, because there's always that one family that's just unusual, and their interests will be very different from the majority of others. But still, it could be a very, very helpful tool. So I saw, like Melissa, you guys up in Crittenden, you did this. Oh no, I thought you did a superhero programming. That'll teach me to skim it. If you're doing programming, and especially if you're spending quite a bit of money on it, it's good to have an idea what is working for the people that are coming to your library. It also gives you an idea about how they're finding out information, and perhaps then you can hone where you're sending information out to. Yeah, does that help? Okay, other questions that you guys are talking about. How can I help with this? So as you're typing and putting in questions, I'm gonna continue on a little bit. So as we're doing program, we look at a multitude of genres. So what do you like to do? What have your patrons talked about enjoying? But I'll go back to what do you like to do? So if you are enjoying yourself and it's something you're passionate about, often that feeling can be transmitted to the people that are there, and they'll catch on to it as well. So please feel free to type in other comments or things that you are dealing with on your side, and maybe I can help problem solve, or we can talk through them. So I said I was going to go back to these pages. As we're looking at programming, and as we're looking at the setup in general of the learning space of the youth areas, we need to consider a bunch of stuff. And you may not be aware that this is happening, but it is. We want a place where children can experience things. So those perhaps would be where interactive toys might be, or puzzles might be. It's more a learning space of exploration. We also need a space where they feel empowered. And for your people, that might be the computer areas, or that might be a certain area where you have the magazines laid out, because a lot of libraries still have magazines. What empowerment and how you empower your patrons looks different. It's a place of participation. Often has meeting rooms connected to it. And of course, the space isn't just a square. It's just giving you an idea of the different things we look for. And again, that meeting space is going to be important and integral to involvement, where we pull people into participating in groups, and also to have space for themselves where they begin to own the library and make it their own. And then finally, we're also looking at places where they can be innovative. And what that means to a child might be very different than what that means to a tween. And what it means to a tween might be very different than it means to a teen. So this is one of the reasons, when you consider the developmental speeds and different levels that kids are at, why we have different library areas. So it's not just for space. It's not just for shelving. We have the kids in an area for a reason, and we have the teens in an area for a reason. And a lot of that is reflective on their developmental and their communicative skills. Um, there are libraries that are starting to have tween spaces, so that group that's right in between the two, where they're not old enough to be a teenager, but they know they really want to be there. Um, Sometimes there are tween areas. Other times you'll see libraries that they'll kind of manipulate a corner or a section that will be like for the slightly older kids, or they'll manipulate a section for the slightly younger kids or the babies. So they'll have an area where the kids can climb around and dig and dive. So this would be a kids area, of course. You could see how it could easily become an area for teens. If they wanted to get into parkour and go on the roofs of the shelving tops. Um, you can also see how it could be a space for babies as they're trying to stand up and can use the seats as to enable them to do so. But overall, it's pretty obvious this is the kids section, right? You have the colors that are warm and inviting. You still have the padded areas so they don't hit their heads, but it's also comfy. So it want to make sense, right? Here's another kids area. And you can see here that this is much more enclosed. It's not actually solidly enclosed, but that couch does a huge amount of um, corralling the kids to a certain area and corralling the toys that they're playing with to a certain area so they don't get kicked across the entire building. So you can see this is an inviting area that encourages families and adults to sit on the floor with the kids. Everything is lower, and a lot of things are at very, very much toward the ground. You have things on the ground. You have mobile units that you can manipulate to different areas. So it gives different patrons a way to actually congregate together as they can shift different things. So that just by its nature and mobility, this encourages those parent hangout times, those mommy groups that often will come in and talk and share how child raising skills and ideas. But these you'll see are quite different from what the teens are attracted to. Now, the teens are more attracted to the clean, very sleek looking environments. Kind of a hip retro look is really common right now. The comfy chairs that they can lounge and lie on and sit on top of each other, real common. So with very sleek backgrounds. In the back left corner, you'll see those chairs that are rocking chairs and also gamer chairs. So as we're doing programming, we can look at these environments and say, hey, let's meet here. We'll do a baby time group right in front of this couch, move everything else there, and then see what might happen. So my guess is you would do a programming probably once in this area and probably not do it again. Because if you look at the walls, even if you remove everything from the floor, the kids are still going to be highly attracted to everything on the walls. So probably they're not going to listen to you or want to sit in their mommy or daddy or caregiver's lap. They'll want to play. So it might be that you can integrate that into the programming, or it might be that this space just doesn't work. Now, this space for programming could be phenomenal for a writer's group. It could be great for an art program, depending on what media you're using. You probably won't want to bring paint out into where all the carpeting is, but this could be a really great program area. Is it going to be private? No, it's out in the open. So probably not serious discussions of anything. It might not be the best environment for a book talk because everyone is compartmentalized. So it's interesting what we have to look at about when you're thinking where to do a program. Now, this could work for a book group. Having those chairs, pulling up the gaming rockers, pulling up that side, I don't know, piano bench, and everyone kind of sits in a circle. You might have the fights over so and so knocked me off the cushion, or there's not enough room on the couches, but it could work very, very well. It wouldn't work for a writing group, though, or it's less likely to because there's just not a table or something for them to work with. But if they have laptops or you bring out laptops, that could work. So just things to consider as you're even looking at where to do a program. So, and yeah, Teresa, you're right. Everything is flipped on its head with the pandemic. So all this stuff is great to know, but it's, when you're considering space, it's less useful because we're on a virtual platform for the most part. And so for programming, as what we talked about a little bit with Candace's question, is, finding out where your patrons are meeting, and that's asking questions, or if you were fortunate enough to already have a children's group or a youth group or a group with parents that you're consistently communicating with that you could just transfer to a different platform, that's wonderful. But many libraries didn't use that virtual platform prior to the pandemic, so we're having to learn new skill sets and in a sense teach our patrons new skill sets, and that too is difficult with the gigantic digital divide that we have, where so many people don't have internet access if the libraries are closed or when the schools are out, and everything you guys have been dealing with. So in the best of worlds, I would encourage you to try and find out as much as possible the information that is at hand. So that would be, where are your patrons hanging out? So for the kids, where are the adult caregivers hanging out, and how can you communicate with them? And then what format is likely the easiest? And that may be a simple Zoom meeting, or it might be, the Google Classrooms. Finding out what they feel most comfortable will help. If there's impediments of technical difficulties or just not understanding how a platform works, or feeling frightened of trying a new platform, that might be an impediment that stops people from coming to your groups. So I'd encourage you to find out their comfortabilities. If in some libraries your patrons just don't have computer capabilities and don't have access, then I'd encourage you to lean more toward the grab and goes. So making up book packs of different themes, or a grab bag. These are our youth services favorite books. Perhaps you'll like them too, and use that as a way where they can come and pick up things and leave. And then you can put little notes in there, you can put flyers in there, and go back to the old school way of communication. And I do know a lot of branches have had to do that. And then finally, with regards to the virtual world, if you were to consider what is effective around the country, and so that would be communicating on the different listservs with the different service providers. So that would be YALSA or ALSC. If you're on their blogs or on their listservs, there's communications with how is best to reach these age groups. And there's some different apps that teens will like that a lot of adults kind of shy away from, and again, generically speaking. But Discord is one, Twitch is another one, and Roll20 is another one. And all three of those have gotten pretty hefty use, and I'd say especially Discord if you're interested in peeking in at that. Um, if you're at all curious about that, we had someone present on Discord and the platform at the kayak conference last year, and I can dig out that link, unless Alicia, you can do it and throw it in the chat for him. But that she walks you right through it and how to use it, and that may be a way that works for you and yours. It might not, but it's another alternative to platforms that are out there that people are already using. Yeah, well, Melissa, yeah, you're right. There's the Team Programming Underground. That is a Facebook group of a bunch of librarians, and there's other people on it too that are trying to share ideas of what's and what doesn't work. And it's good to ask outside of your branch and to find out what other people are running into. This is a site called Programming Librarian. And I did the pull down there and took a screenshot so you could see what's available. But it is done through the American Library Association, and people send in programming ideas that have been successful for them. Every once in a while there's a session where they throw in their flops and just like, please never do this kind of thing, and it's hilarious to read through that. I want to say Bourbon County. Lauren, I'll have to look it up, Alicia. I may have to just send it out later about the Discord presentation. So anyway, the Programming Librarian, this is, so you can toggle if you're dealing with children and their families. If you're dealing, if you're looking to do programming for tweens or teens, for young adults, that's another, that kind of catches tween and teen together. And I even check the college students area because so much of that can transfer down to teens. And there's, you know, when you start college, you're 18. So technically you're still in that area. There is, and I will say sadly that I'm sure it will continue. There is a homeless population that's out there of kids. And so there's even a toggle for programming for that. I've also found that quite a few senior programs can be tweaked with very little changing to fit kids. And actually flipping that on its head the other way around is a lot of kids programs can be flipped for adults or seniors as well. Sometimes you just have to change the presentation. But anyway, Programming Librarian is a great resource if you're just stumped. Another resource if you're stumped on programs is Pinterest. There are librarians that throw up a ton of ideas, and it's, you know, it'll just be the image, but you know, a picture's 1,000 words, right? So you get the ideas of where they're going with things. At times you can click on the images and it'll give you the links where it came from, and you get the greater ideas of things. So this is an example of different kids materials, and then you can see even how it's presented. This is much more sleek, a lot more darker colors, obviously the teen programs. So all you have to do is go to Pinterest and type in teen public library programs, and you'll just get a ton of ideas, or children public library programs, or you can even skip the public part and just say library. You'll still get them. Really easy locations to get a whole bunch of ideas. So if you ever are stuck where your children or you services librarian or staff are not in the building and families are coming in for a program, here is the most basic outline of something I would recommend doing is a song, a book, a song, a book, a song, a book, and bye-bye. So you can make up the songs. They're not going to care. You can use music that you know. Depending on the age group, you want to choose what you're singing about. You know, a hello song could just be simply, hello, hello, hello to you. You're done. Just kind of go make a sing-songy noise. Go between two notes if you don't feel comfortable doing a tune. You can think of like Jingle Bells. So hello, hello. Oh no, that's Twinkle Star. Hello, hello, how are you? I am fine. They are too, or something like that. I'm just making it up. So same thing with goodbye. And songs in the middle can be rhythms. It could be breaking words down to syllables, clapping their hands, hitting their legs, creating some type of movement. You can, if you wanted to, and you're like, I just don't sing. Okay, do something rhythmic. Do some stretches in place of where it says song. Do a stretch. Do a finger play. Um, 5 little monkeys jumping on a bed. Do it in rhythm instead of singing it. Have them move their fingers. Have them stretch up high, stretch up low. Um, it doesn't have to be a song, but it's basically a book surrounded by something else. The younger they are, the more you want to get them to move. They have a hard time sitting still, and that makes it hard. And it might just hard to do the program without interruptions. It might be as simple as every time you're a little achy from sitting still, do a stretch. Have them touch different parts on their body, or some, touch your nose, touch your head. And if you have a silly, make silly expressions with your face, that could be the interruption between books. That is really simple. As far as books go, so I helped you with, song slash movement. Just kind of think that. If you don't want to sing hello or goodbye, just say, thank you for being here. I'm not usually your person here, but I'm really, really glad to see each and every one of you. Just kind of, become your inner Mr. Roger for a moment. As far as books go, if you have no idea where to start, go to Dewey in the 398s, or in Library of Congress. It's a lot more complicated, but basically you're looking for folk tales or fairy tales. That is something that can be done to any age group. It doesn't matter. It's one of these areas of books that cross all generations. So if you're reading to babies, they're going to hear your voice, but the story's really for the adults a little bit more. It's not the perfect choice. There's no material out there that catches every single age group, but this is I would suggest this is as close as you can get. So go out, grab some folk tales, grab some fairy tales. In general, here's an easy cheat. Easy cheat: 5 fingers. If get one of the kids, or pretend that you're one of the kids in the group. 1 finger in this book is way too easy. So if they don't know one of the words, so let me back up. Every time they don't know a word or don't understand it, they'll put up a finger. So if they get 1 finger up, the book's probably too easy. If there's 2 words on a page they don't know, then it's almost too easy. If there's 3 fingers up on a page on a book they don't know, then that's just right. Those are the books that you'd want to use for the program for that age group. If there's 4 words, it's starting to get too hard. If there's 5 words on a page they don't know, take a pass. So that's just a really easy way. It's just, think, what would this group know? What would this kid know? Pick one of the kids in the group that you've seen. What would they know? It's just a tool to help. Another thing you could do is I don't know if you can see, there are wordless picture books. They're often called silent books, and they don't have any words at all. but they tell a story. And you could just look up silent books. It's almost always incredible art. And what you could do is use this book with the group, the adults or the kids, to tell a story to the group, or to ask a bunch of I wonder questions. So I wonder what's going on right here. I wonder what they're doing. I wonder if that bird is going to chase her. And that would take up quite a bit of time, so that is less stressful for you. But it also just really could be an opportunity to grow their vocabulary and their imagination and their communication skills. It may be a way to help increase bonding between the adult and the child that's there together, because a parent may hear something come out of them, or the adult may hear something come out of the child's mouth that they've never heard before, and it just may really touch them. So those are different simple ideas that could work really quickly for you on the fly. Yes, Candace put also, there's another program ideas that she put in for different story times. You can Google, if you want to go back to Google, you can Google story time for 3-year-olds, story time for 4-year-olds, story time fire trucks. It'll come up. It's story times are variants, and all of, hopefully less freaked out with finger rule, and then this here of how simple it and as you get more comfortable, you can make this outline much more difficult and much more involved to incorporate more of the senses, more movements, more vocabulary. But if you're just doing it on the fly with no backup, this is the way to go, nice and simple. So hopefully you'll find that helpful. That was all. It's so hard to bring this all down without actual physical examples and and virtual, as we've been talking about. If you have questions or thoughts or need some help digging up information, I'm always here too, and or almost always here, and you're more than welcome to send me an email, and I'll help you dig or come up with information, or happy to send you resources. So that is a huge nutshell of programming. I hope it was useful and beneficial, and maybe things are a little less scary if you get thrown into the fray of having to do a simple online or in-person program of a story time. So next week we'll talk about some other things. I'm confident that, if you just find 3 books, come up with some other things to do that are movement or song or rhythm, you can easily do this. So you don't have to think of the more complicated information that I gave you. So just, sometimes we'll tell the kids, trust in yourself. All right, that was dorky. So anyway, thank you guys for being here today. I know it was a whole bunch of information coming your way again, and I appreciate you listening and for the comments that you made in the chat. That helped me to hone things I was talking about as well. And we will see you all next week, and I'll try and give you some more examples to explain some of the weird nuances that is youth services. So thanks all.
All right. Thank you, Amy, very much. We all appreciate it. You have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
All right. And everybody else, thank you all for coming. Okay. Yeah, Melissa, that last full week of August, instead of Wednesday, we'll be doing Tuesday, but I'll remind you all, and Amy will probably remind me because my brain sometimes doesn't remember everything. So, but I think it's like maybe the 24th instead of the 25th. But I'll send that out in the email reminder. So, everybody, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all for attending. Really appreciate y'all still hanging in there. Well, if you are, then we'll catch you on the flip side. So, all the best. So, all right. All right. Well, if y'all need anything in the meantime, y'all just let me know and go forth and have a wonderful day. So, goodbye, everybody.